I think the distance is adequate for me to remove the mask. Because, ആദരണീയ അഭിമന്യ ബർണബാസ് തിരുമേനി, സന്നിഹിതരായിരിക്കുന്ന വൈദിക ശ്രേഷ്ഠരെ, കൊച്ചമ്മമാരെ, പ്രിൻസിപ്പൽസ്, academicians and academic managers. I am at a slight disadvantage being the last speaker of the 3-day session. The last speaker of any workshop or capacity development program always has a handicap, because whatever imaginative architecture one would have contemplated to cover in a brief address, almost 90% of it would have probably been covered already. And especially since the theme of this leadership program is such that there is likely to be a lot of overlap on what has been said and what is yet to be said. Therefore, I seek your indulgence if there is a repetition and you have already gone through that particular aspect of the leadership development program. My dear friends, as Professor Ranjana said, I also, like my previous speaker, belong to an All India service. So that gives us the license to talk on almost everything under the sun. Because we are a species who are supposed to be knowing everything superficially, but nothing in depth. Because over 30-35 years of service, we are like a rolling stone. Yes. We go into one department, understand that department in maybe in 6 weeks' time. You don't have a 6 weeks' time to start functioning and leading the department. So you know something about everything, but nothing much about anything. But basically, I am a student of economics. I taught PG students economics in Karivattam in the Department of Economics here. And before that, I spent an year of teaching in Moore College, Mavelikara. I spent 2 years in Indian Police Service. Left it not because police service is anyway inferior, but I found I may be inferior for that service. And then moved on to IAS and spent around 34 years in the IAS. But if in the 35-37 years plus the teaching, and then 5 years later as Director and Vice Chancellor of the Government of India's deemed university, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. So almost 40 years of experience in diverse fields, I would presume that I have some right to talk about the leadership issue and enhancing of leadership in managing institutions. When our previous generation or the generation prior to that looked at institution building, I recollect, say if you look at prior to independence of India and the 3-4 decades immediately after the independence, there was a crying need for institutions, because obviously the British had set up or enabled only very few institutions in this country, because their aim was not a welfare society, it was certainly an exploitation of a colony. In that process, something good might have come, but unintended. So if I look at some of the institutions which have left a mark, 1815 the CMS College, and before that CMS High School. 1837 Madras Christian College. 1921 UC College, Alway. 1922 SB College, Changanasheri. 1941 Tata Memorial Hospital, Bombay. 1945 Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Bombay. And 1952 Marthama College, Tiruvalla. I didn't cover everything. I just covered a few institutions which have left a mark in our society and in our nation. They were set up dating back, as said, to the 1800s till after independence also. A number of institutions came up. So the first question which I want to ask and share with you in thoughts is that, do we need more institutions, particularly in the educational field? This is a question, I think, which needs to be asked seriously. I also belong to a parish and a church, not the Marthoma Church, but a sister church. And in many places, whether it is in Delhi or Bhopal, or I was in Madhya Pradesh cadre in the IAS, so I'm familiar with Madhya Pradesh and other North Indian states. Almost every parish, if it has some means, wants to have a school and they're aspiring a little more higher to a college, etc., or a professional college. So the first question which I want to ask is, do we need more educational institutions? There is a supply glut, excess of supply in higher educational institutions. But I remember the Higher Education Minister of India, Kapil Sibal, then Education Minister, HRD Minister, and of course a leading luminary in the legal field, qualifying higher education in India as the sick child of education. Because most of the institutions have failed to come up to the expectations. International comparisons are always difficult because the circumstances, the governance structure, everything differs from country to country. But it's a fact that hardly there is any institution of reckoning in India which can be considered as among the top 25 institutions in the world. There is nothing. So therefore, while we have quantity, we don't have quality. Quantity doesn't substitute for quality. There are a number of reasons. One of the reasons in that conference where HRD Minister was mentioning was that utter unwillingness of university administrators and the teaching community to change. Let me tell you, my dear friends, teachers do not want to learn new things. You may not agree with it, but they are not in the learning mode in their entire academic career. It is very easy to dust up your old notes, fill up some latest data so you can say that you have the latest data to quote from. But this window dressing is just window dressing, nothing deeper than that. So you go to a class, the same note which you would have had over the last decade, that is a template. That template is taken and add a little bit of, in Hindi they call it tadka, നമുക്ക് എന്തെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടായി കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് അവസാനം കടുക് വറക്കുന്ന പോലെ സ്വല്പം ഡേറ്റ അതിനകത്ത് ആഡ് ചെയ്യുക. So you are updated. And that is your whole contribution to the latest what is happening in your sphere of knowledge. Therefore, our institutions have decayed because the teaching community as a whole, I am not talking about individual members, maybe there who have a very high calling. They want to spend their time, understand what happens in their knowledge sphere, read the latest journals, contribute in latest journals through articles in referred journals. But that's a minuscule minority. So on the whole, if syllabi get changed, if the latest is added into the syllabus, then the teachers have to learn new things. And there is a great reluctance to learn new things. അപ്പം അധ്യാപനവും കൃഷിയും വ്യവസായവും എല്ലാം കൂടെ ഒന്നിച്ചു കൊണ്ടുപോകാൻ വലിയ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടാവും. ബിക്കോസ് teaching is a part-time activity. The main activity is multifarious income-generating activities. It's a hard reality. People may not like it. With the result, whether it is the FICCI or the CII or anyone who does a survey as to what percentage of our graduates, engineers, accountants are employable, the ratio varies from 10 to 25. Maximum is around 25% are employable and minimum comes around 10%. So vast majority of around 75 to 90% of students who pass out are not employable at all. Then you may ask me the counter question, what is the purpose of education? Is it only employment? Is it not deep building of knowledge? Education for the sake of education. Well, my dear friends, these are all good, but neither they are learning in terms of deeper knowledge, nor it is equipping them to get a decent job anywhere. So therefore, my first presumption to share with you is that start a new institution in the field of education by the church or the parish only if you can make a difference. Only if you can make a difference in terms of quality. We don't want the run-of-the-mill institutions which have outlived the context. And there is immense and crying need for quality. As I said, we don't have any leading institutions of reckoning. I had an occasion to do a master's degree from Harvard. And when you go into the Widener Library, around 90-95% of that library is underground. The Cambridge Square roads run above, metro runs above. The library is so vast, like in metro stations, underground metro stations, you have yellow line, red line, and green line. Because you will get lost, so you can get hold or come to a junction, take an yellow line or a green line through the map and come up. Is the second largest library in the world, the first being the Library of Congress. How good is our library? Even if you have a reasonably good library, are the students and teachers using it? So therefore, my first input I want to share with you is, think 10 times before starting a new educational institution. The name of the church and the parish should be held in high esteem, so you should contribute if you can contribute meaningfully in terms of quality. When the Marthoma Church was starting a new MBA institution in Kochi, some of the leaders of the Marthoma Church had shared that idea with me. Because I was heading one of the top 10 management institutions of this country, which was at that time Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. The name is Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, but it is a management institution of deep academic grounding. Around 100 students are there at a time doing PhD. We had campuses in Delhi, Calcutta, and Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. and 100% placement on day 1 or day 2, because by second day everybody is placed in very comfortable jobs. So I was asked whether we should start, the Marthoma Church should start a new management school. I shared the same view. There are more than 4,500 managed schools in this country, out of which if a student has studied in one of the top 50 or 100, he or she has a chance of getting a decent job. Once you go down the list, it is impossible to find a decent job if you pass out from there. Because management degree is one where the degree as such has little value. Only the institution where you have studied gives you value. Because your alumni is your statement of authentication. If your alumni is good, then you pass out from that institution. Nobody will ask a second time whether you should be taken or not. Of course, our management school came up in Ernakulam and it is struggling to fill the seats. I wish it all success. I am not saying that it not have been done, but then quality is the problem. My dear friends, when good institutions were set up, publicly funded or charity funded, like the Tatas, all institutions were fundamentally set up by Tatas, but it is a corporate entity which has a very high calling as far as social good is concerned. Or you look at the institutional structure of successful universities like Harvard and Princeton and all those, Oxford and all that, they are all semi-publicly funded, but mostly through funds generated through endowments. They were all set up for meaningfully contributing to the knowledge and for imparting knowledge to the young generation. It was not for profit. Today, we all know that in the last 2 decades particularly, a plethora of private universities have come up. A number of private deemed universities have come up. And thousands of engineering colleges and a few medical colleges have come. Because it is easy to set up an engineering college compared to medical college, because in medical college you need a hospital for practical training, and and to build a reputation takes time for your hospital to run successfully. So unless you have a hospital, then the students will have to be distributed to various other government hospitals. Those government hospitals are also oversubscribed by students because various colleges, students come there for practical training. But it's easy to start an engineering college or a management school. All you need is classrooms and air conditioned seating arrangements and buildings and things like that. So they have been started as a business venture. Education was never a business venture. It was for a deeper purpose. So who set up these institutions, whether it is engineering or private universities? Most of them by mining contractors and liquor mafia, politicians siphoning off ill-gotten wealth, and also some bureaucrats, I'm sure. So for them it is an investment which should give return. So why I am mentioning is, the church is different. Our purpose is not making money. Our purpose is to set up institutions which in the medium long run can manage its finances well but give quality. So excellence should be the guiding motto of the Marthoma Church or any other such institutions to be present in the field of education. The second aspect which I would like to share with you is that Is education the only field where the church and the parishes needed to intervene? Is there a critical supply gap in institutions which our society needs? I happen to be on the national board of HelpAge India. It's an institution which works for the welfare of the aged in this country. We are the premier institution. We got the UN award as the best institution this year. There's a crying need to have institutions for the welfare of the aged. Because many of us have a feeling that, Malayalis are by and large educated. We know our responsibilities. We have a family ecosystem. We don't send our parents to nursing homes and institutions like they do in the West. We often shout it from rooftop saying that we are superior, they are inferior because their parents are quartered in such institutions. But my dear friends, our study based on a large sample, which is published by HelpAge India, has shown that the abuse of elders is around 40 to 50%, if not more. That means out of 100 elders you take, at least 50 or 40 are facing abuse. Abuse doesn't mean only physical torture. Neglect. You can imagine what neglect can lead to. See, you are irrelevant. You have done your course of living. Now you are no more of any relevance to my pursuits. So therefore, they are in a corner. They don't have anybody to share, talk to, and they feel isolated and neglected. It's a very serious form of abuse. And similarly, you have physical abuse, which is in decent families you don't speak out, as we say. Our problems are internal, we manage it internally. How is you are managing it? But not allowing it to come in public, but the elders continues to face the same neglect or abuse. So therefore, church has a very relevant role in building institutions, keeping in view the welfare of the aged. How can you do that? I know that the church is doing a number of good things in this field. You have your homes where the elders are taken care of, their health needs are taken care of, but you need it in larger number. You need it in much larger number. And you need to set up capacity building to look after the elders. Please understand that looking after the elders needs capacity building for those who are in the task of looking after the elders, because it's a specialized way in which you have to handle various things for the elders. So you need training, physiotherapy, various things are there. So I would say the church needs to look at, the parishes needs to look at welfare of the aged as one of the focus areas of initiatives which you can take, which makes a difference to those individuals and society. In many homes, what has happened is, പിള്ളേരൊക്കെ വലുതായി കല്യാണമൊക്കെ കഴിച്ച് അവരവരുടെ പെർസ്യൂട്ടിലേക്കൊക്കെ പോകുമ്പോഴേ പേരൻസിൻ്റെ പുറത്ത് വലിയ പ്രഷറുണ്ട്, ഭാഗം ചെയ്ത് കൊടുക്കണം, ഇതെല്ലാം പാർട്ടീഷൻ ചെയ്ത് കൊടുക്കണം. സോ അപ്പം കൂടെ താമസിപ്പിക്കാമെന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഇളയ മോനും മരുമോളും പഴയ നമ്മുടെ സിസ്റ്റം അനുസരിച്ച് കൂടുതലും അങ്ങനെയാണ്. ഒക്കെ പറയും ഞാൻ വളരെ പൊന്നുപോലെ നോക്കിക്കോളാം, അതൊക്കെ കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഭാഗം ചെയ്ത് സ്വന്തം പേരിലൊക്കെ ആക്കി കഴിയുമ്പം പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ പലയിടത്തും തുടങ്ങുന്നുണ്ട്, എല്ലായിടത്തും അല്ല. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞ് പലയിടത്തും ഡിവൈഡ് ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങും. ഒരാളെ നീ നോക്കാം, ഒരാളെ ഞാൻ നോക്കാം. So there is a property, devolution of property by the elders, and how should it be handled is a matter of lot of study. There is something called a reverse mortgage for the elders. That means if you are not looking after, if the elders have a feeling that your children may not take care of course they wish you take care of, they are taken care of, but there is a possibility of generating income through reverse mortgaging of their share of the property. They can give something to the children, but their share, something has to be kept reserved. If there is an economic problem for them, you can reverse mortgage it and generate revenue. And after your time, if the children want, they can redeem that property after fulfilling the obligations to the bank. So advise families as to how the elders can take care of themselves if such an eventuality comes. I'm not advising on the legal procedures. There are a number of legal procedures which of course Mr. Jacob Punnus knows, and district magistrate, the collector is the chairman at the district level for the welfare of the aged and the laws relating to that. There can be maintenance awarded and things like that. So there is, I just wanted to mention this as one of the areas where the church probably could focus upon. The second is children's welfare. There are a number of children who are abused, who are neglected, especially in families where the father or mother have gone for a second marriage. The first marriage, children, you read in everyday newspaper how many of them are killed, murdered, burned, things like that, because your child is a liability to you for your freedom. It is happening around you. There may be children of parents who have had AIDS or such other diseases, where society marginalizes and avoids children. They find it difficult to go to the same school. There is other parents have objections. So children's welfare is an area. Adoption centers are an area. But I would urge a great caution in going to some of those areas, particularly children and adoption. Though there is a need, I'm sorry to say that in the last almost 7-8 years, such institutions have come under severe attack. Pan-India, institutions care for children had to be closed because the authorities have come up for various reasons and put such conditions which cannot be met. In Bihar, in Orissa, Jharkhand, many of the Christian institutions had to be closed down. It's a reality of our current situation that there are minority institutions which are looked upon with a lot of suspicion. We may or may not face it in Kerala, but it's a reality if you look at on a pan-India basis. So those areas are relevant, but starting institutions, there are imponderables and impediments which should be understood. We would like many a times our institutions to be supported by our well-wishers, parish members, general community, and even foreign donations. Unfortunately, friends, getting donations and collecting charity is again a very, very difficult situation as of now. Because I am associated with a number of charitable institutions. We go through this, it is becoming almost impossible because if one of the directors of a charitable institution has any linkage to a business entity, you are on the board of a company, you have a share in a company, then the depth of information and data you have to give to the authorities is unending. And getting a tax-free entitlement has become all the more difficult because any contribution coming to a minority institution is viewed as, sorry to say, anti-national. It's a reality, but various ways in which persecution takes place. I was in Delhi. John Mathai called me up. He was here as Chief Secretary and said whether I could intervene in Bhopal, where a Catholic priest has been arrested. They are not giving him bail. They are not allowing anybody to meet him. What is the ground? One child has been prohibited from singing national anthem, is the allegation. It never happened. You know, in a school assembly, can you prevent any student from singing national anthem? But with very, very great difficulty, I knew the secretary to the chief minister, then I spoke to him and he got released on bond. Why did it happen? Because an influential leader's son didn't get admission in the school. So, persecution of our institutions, in rest of India at least, is a real threat. And I would urge our people to be aware of it and take care of those eventualities by doing certain things. Firstly, your accounting should be immaculate. Any institution you run, you should have a foolproof accounting system. Money spent on a good chartered accountant to audit your accounts and complete that audit in a financial year, at least within the next 3 to 4 months, is a must, because it can lead you into a lot of trouble. The second is communication. Many times I have seen our church and church institutions, they may say something without meaning any ill will, but it ends up as if we have done a great crime because unintended motives are attributed. Because a phraseology which was used or something which you said, it hurt someone. So please ensure that the communication skills of your spokesperson. And in an institution, you always designate somebody as your spokesperson so that only that person speaks for the institution. Because somebody speaking, somebody which can be interpreted differently can land an institution in serious trouble. Then gender sensitivity. Increasingly, gender sensitivity is becoming a real issue on which our staff, managers of institutions needed to be made aware of. Whether it is the Vaisaga guidelines of the Supreme Court or whether it is equal opportunities, please ensure your inner urge to do good should not be misconstrued in any way. A number of situations have come where counseling many of our church clergy, senior clergy and parishes do counseling. I know that you mean well to give freedom from distress, but please ensure that your counseling work is done in such a way that it doesn't give rise to an occasion for anybody to level any allegation or a complaint. Because we have to be aware of the reality of the situation around you. You know that you have confidence in yourself and the others have confidence, but then demonstrate that your actions can be scrutinized by anyone. When I was in many of the institutions where I was, when a lady employee comes to express some grievance or a complaint, I used to ask one of the personal staff, who is a lady, to be at the far end of the room near the door so that the person who has come to meet me doesn't see the other person, but she can watch the proceedings. Because it's very easy to level an allegation. You have to go through a huge process of humiliation, legal problems, if you have to come out of it. So therefore, I would say that our institutions, whosoever is heading, whether it is a laity or a priest, be aware of the reality in which we live and take appropriate remedial action. Because institution management and managing institutions have all these aspects which you cannot wish away. Another aspect which I would like to mention is legal documentation aspect of our institutions. I thought I will share it with that aspect because I was secretary to two chief ministers in Madhya Pradesh, and I had seen an archbishop coming to the chief minister, and I was present when he was not an archbishop but a bishop. The problems they landed up because their ancient churches were taken over by extraneous elements. Very old institutions set up during the British India, because the title document was in the name of X person. That person hypothecated it to somebody, created a liability on this property. Church never knew. One fine morning, your prestigious 200-old institution is no longer yours, because the property has been spirited away by somebody. It happened to Church of North India in a big way in North India. And they had some of the most prestigious institutions set up during the British rule. So after that, the Archbishop of Bhopal came, and I was there, so I advised the Archbishop, Eugene D'Souza at that time, Bishop, please do a physical audit and verification of all your title deeds and documents. If there is, you have to make sure that your documents are there and there is no lacunae. Then that led to the diocese coming up with a template in which registered deeds are to be drafted. Consulting good lawyers, it was drafted so that the property doesn't go to any individual. So, please ensure that whenever you set up an institution, acquire property of immovable nature, the title deeds are well drafted so that the property remains that of the society, that of the church, or the entity which rightfully belongs, and it doesn't have the possibility of being filtered away. And it also happened to the Orthodox Church, which I'm aware of. A number of properties we have lost because the bishop or without the knowledge, maybe the priest concerned, at some point in time, there are always people with not exactly the best motive, because it's a reality, so we should be aware. So therefore, take care of it in advance through proper documentational requirements of title deeds. In running our institutions, we need quality manpower. In running our educational institutions, particularly in the academic faculty, you need quality faculty. Therefore, incentivize knowledge acquisition by your faculty, sending them through short-term programs. Of course, every institution may not have the pleasure and privilege of some of the national institutions, like the IIFT, which I was heading. We had a policy of no blind promotion to any professor. Blind, I said, because somebody has put in 20 years, you should become a reader or an associate professor, or you have put in another 5 years or 10 years as associate professor, you should become a professor. No such rule. Every level, assistant professor, associate professor, professor, all three levels are through direct recruitment. For every higher level, outsiders can apply. Your internal professors who are to the next grade, they can also apply. You constitute a high level, highly competent external persons dominated interview board, so that there is no aspersion on partiality, and their recommendations are sacrosanct, you implement it. Somebody may get promoted internally, somebody may not get that post, somebody may go it outside. So what is the result? There is a constant enthusiasm on the part of your faculty for knowledge acquisition, for publishing new papers in refereed journals, for going and getting consultancy from various sectors so that your work can be demonstrated. But we don't have that ecosystem in this state. I understand. But in whatever little way you can incentivize quality, please give that input. Otherwise, a good, hard-working, competent person will get disheartened. If a third-rate fellow gets the same as that of a dynamic individual, then what is the motivation for that dynamic person to continue to perform at a higher level? So therefore, institutions should incentivize quality performance. We are just nearing 12 o'clock, and I don't want to talk at length, but there are a number of issues. But only last point which I would like to mention is how good is your code of conduct for the employees? I know that before anybody joins an institution, you make them sign a code of conduct. But periodically review the code of conduct based on contemporary developments in society. Like, I am sure that the code of conduct in many institutions may not cover about social media posts, digital media interaction, because these were not there when those employees joined your institution. So please keep on updating your code of conduct requirements so that no harm is done to the institution. So, my dear friends, it was my privilege to be with you. I had a similar occasion for the entire Marthoma Church of academic administrators in Maraman in 2015, where there was a 3-day conference. So the vice principals, and academic administrators of the Marthoma Church had attended that. I had the privilege to take a session there, but on an entirely different subject. I'm happy to have been in your midst. I don't know whether it added any value to this conference. As I said, I don't know what was covered, what was not covered, whether it is relevant, not relevant. But I feel that the opportunity to be with you, this penultimate, the last day of your session, has given me immense happiness. And I hope that the 3-day conference found its resonance, and wish you all best, good luck, and good luck for the institutions which you are running or which you intend to set up. Thank you very much.
May I request Subinachan to short. Thank you, Brad.
Respected K.T. Chacko, sir, thank you for the wonderful session that you have led us. We are indeed indebted to you for the session. The talk was very vibrant and encouraging. You have challenged us to respond to ourselves and to the society and to bear the challenges of the hour. As to conclude, I would say, if excellence is the peak, no individual is really weak. The old saying goes, failure is a stepping stone for success. Today, we can say innovation is the key for excellence. The jotted points that you have shared will be really useful for us. On behalf of Yohanan Marthoma Memorial Study Center and Xavier Institute of Management and Entrepreneurship, we extend our heartfelt thanks. Thank you, sir. We request you to please accept the token on behalf of our institutions. Thank you. Thank you so much.